bios for our speakers today, and we'll get moving. So today we have Jeff Katz and Aimee Mussman from the Iowa Children's Museum. I'm super excited for them to share with you. Jeff has worked and played at the museum for a long time. He's been there since 2019, but before that, he spent 10 years as executive director of Cedar Valley Habitat for Humanity in Cedar Rapids. He and his wife, Amber, have 2 daughters, and they live in Iowa City. And Aimee is assistant director of the Children's Museum, where she oversees museum education, exhibits, and the playology team. She has worked at the museum in a variety of capacities since 2001. And Aimee and her husband, Mike, have a teenage daughter and live in Cedar Rapids. So I will turn it over to you two. Let me know if you need anything.
Thanks so much, Ellie, and it's our great pleasure to be here today. And just as I was about to share my screen, it disappeared on me again. So appreciate the introduction, Ellie. And as we talked about a few minutes ago, we have been talking about this for a long time. So it's great that this has come to fruition, and we're really happy to share a little bit about what we've learned along the way. And I still cannot find my file. Why did it disappear?
Back and click that tab.
Oh, is that what I did? Okay. Now I need to go back, right? Nope, that's not it. Oh, now you get to see my amazing screen there. Boy, Ellie, this is really exciting. There we go.
You're all good.
You're going to be sorry that you asked us to do this. No. One personal note, Ellie is a board member of the ICM, and so we are so grateful, and serves as our development liaison to the board and the executive committee. And so, Ellie, thank you for your service to the museum, and it's great to be among friends. So a lot of folks that we know on the call, not just Jackie, our colleague. Jackie, thank you for joining, but others as well from our wonderful nonprofit community. So again, just a great honor for us to be here today. And so again, Aimee and Jeff with the Children's Museum, and there is our pride and joy, our space at the mall that we just absolutely adore and have for 25 years this year. So we'll talk a little bit more about that milestone here in a second. But I think one thing that as you look at our leadership team here, minus one, we're missing Amanda, who was out sick that day. But one thing that we are really mindful of is the fact that it's not a foregone conclusion that communities have resources like the Children's Museum. And a lot of you represent organizations that I think, we really punch above our weight as a community in a lot of ways. And I think we try to remain cognizant of that and continue to elevate what we do, but also take time to say, it's pretty awesome what this community supports, and certainly what we have as a nonprofit ecosystem as well, and give Community Foundation a lot of props for that as well, for fostering that the kind of community that supports one another, and certainly supports the community, which is our call as nonprofits. So really glad to be here again and do what we do. So we love this quote. It's a happy talent to know how to play. We believe play is essential, and lifelong play, I would add. That's one of my, when I go out and speak to groups, that's one thing that I really try to emphasize as well. Obviously, we're talking about play for children and families, but the idea of lifelong play and continuing to find ways to learn and grow through play, and acknowledging that it's essential to living a healthy and life and being well. And so that's my little soapbox. We'll try to not go there too often, but I think that quote really speaks to that. Not only to know how to play, but to remember to play. So that would be my challenge to all of you, because we're all busy, we're all stressed, we all have a lot of demands on our time, but there are a lot of ways to play, and it's important. So with that, we thought that it might be helpful to give just a little bit of Children's Museum 101, so to speak. And certainly we could go on and on about this, and about all of the research, and about all of the reasons that we believe so strongly in what we do. But really our call today, our charge today, is to talk a little bit more about hopefully some themes that will resonate with you all, and have some practical applications for you. But before we do that, just to make sure that there's a little bit of a level set with what a children's museum and what our children's museum is specifically, we thought we would spend just a couple minutes on that because let's face it, children's museums are unique in the museum field. We're unique in the nonprofit sector, certainly, but even in the museum field, we're unique, and we acknowledge that. We love that, and this thriving children's museum sector with hundreds of museums all over the country and internationally as well. It is a thriving sector, and we had a bit of a, I think, kind of an existential crisis, as many of us did during the pandemic, and there was talk. Aimee and I were on countless numbers of Zooms and conference calls, and just like, what is the future of children's museums? Is there a future after COVID? In light of this notion that everything we talk about is touch and being interactive. In fact, there's a children's museum in Philadelphia called the Please Touch Museum that is, I think, just pretty on the nose, but kind of a fun way of like framing that a little bit to say, we grew up going to museums like, oh, don't touch that. That's very old and famous and expensive artwork. And here it's like, no, this is what you should do. This is the essence of what we do. And so just to tee that up a little bit further, you probably read the quote multiple times by now because I've been talking so much, but one of my personal heroes, Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, said play is often talked about as if it were a relief from serious learning, but for children, play is serious learning. And I think while we know that, we often forget that. I know I forgot that. My children are now 12 and 15. I know I continue to forget that even at the ages they are now. It's really easy to say, oh yeah, we'll make time for that. We'll get to that after you clean your room or after we go run this errand or whatever. And it is critically important not only in our formal and informal education settings, but also in the home, in our communities, that we remember that play is important for all of us, but it is so central to that healthy child development, and their ability to learn and be the productive humans that we want them to be. Not just productive humans, good humans that we want them to be. And so I think that quote kind of sets the tone for that a little bit. So children's museums are these just miraculously awesome places. I suspect that probably most of you on the call have been to our museum, and maybe you've been to other museums as well. I know for my family, it kind of became, there was that sweet spot there for probably 4 or 5 years where everywhere we went as a family, we were seeking out the Children's Museum in that community. And again, there are a lot, and there are a lot in communities of all sizes. But again, it's not a foregone conclusion that every children's museum, every community is going to have a children's museum. So we feel very fortunate. These are some shots from our museum and from our truck, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But the middle photo and then the photo on the right, I think, illustrates a lot about what we do. So the hands-on nature of our exhibits. You see Josie, one of our colleagues, so one of our playologists, working with a kiddo there in the children's hospital. And so this notion of learning through play, through role play, one thing we love to talk about in the pizzeria there on the right, which is arguably one of my favorite, not arguably, it is arguably my favorite exhibit. And so many lessons packed in there in terms of, you can see there the step-by-step process of making a pizza and fractions. So there's math, there's our healthy kids component, all of these things that are packed into the experience at the Children's Museum. And we could go on and on again about that. But bottom line is, this is an informal learning environment where children are hopefully exposed to arts and culture in a way that they maybe haven't been before. For many of our kids in the community, it's their first museum experience when they come here with our Any Given Child relationship with Iowa City Community School District. And so there's just so much good that happens here through that hands-on learning. And again, our goal is not to replace the formal learning structure, but rather complement that as an informal educational experience. And so we do that through a variety of ways, working with children and families day to day, 6 days a week, but also through special programs as well. And some of those special programs take us outside of the museum, which is what we really want to talk about a little bit more today, outside of our outside of our four walls. So we'll get to that in just a moment, but a couple of stats for you. Since opening our doors in 1999, our 25th anniversary here at the mall, which we are very happy about, Coral Ridge Mall, I think everybody knows that, but just to clarify, we have helped to enrich the lives of more than 2.5 million visitors through our active learning experiences. Last fiscal year alone, which we're on a July 1st to June 30th fiscal year, as probably some of you are as well, we served more than 160,000 individuals, providing 15,000 free admissions through various museum accessibility initiatives, which again, we'll talk about here a little bit more throughout the presentation, because a lot of what we talk about in the course of this presentation is accessibility and how we've aimed to make our museum more and more accessible to everyone. And so that leads straight to our kind of journey on this experience of not only building out this museum here at the mall, but then moving outside of our walls. And I'm going to hand it over to Aimee to kind of start that journey with you in terms of how we've developed as an organization.
Sure. So as Jeff mentioned, we opened in the mall in 1999. And in those early years, our focus was really on educating the public about the museum. It took several years for all of our exhibit spaces to be finished after that. So the staff focus was really inward and working on our facility. Outreach, which we did do at the time, but it was really viewed primarily as marketing. So we spent a lot of time answering questions while we were out and about at community events like, what is a children's museum? Most people that we encountered hadn't been to one before. Or where are you located? Are you in Des Moines? And I think our title is the Iowa Children's Museum. Kind of helped feed that misconception a little bit, but most people weren't aware that we had opened in the mall. We basically functioned like an info table at a lot of these types of events. We went to things like Jazz Fest and Kids Fest, which was over in Des Moines. We were all over the eastern half of the state, letting people know that we were here. We would bring a small activity or a craft for the kids to do while we talked to the parents. And our goal was really to just get that information out about who we were, where we were located. We passed out brochures, lots of coupons. We encouraged folks to check us out the next time that they were at the mall. One of the first off-site community events that we coordinated, as opposed to just attending, was our Move It, Dig It, Do It event, which began in 2006 as a fundraiser for the museum. We held the event at the Johnson County Fairgrounds, and here's some photos from those first couple years there. Then we held it at the Iowa River Landing area, actually, for at least 1 year, and it was just prior to all of the construction that happened there. And then we've been in our mall parking lot ever since then. We've been able to transition away from it being a paid event to it being a sponsored event, thanks to strong support from lots of members of our community. We've learned over the years to involve as many community partners as we can in order to create as rich of an experience as possible for our guests. Early on, we focused on bringing in as many vehicles as we could find. You've probably often heard about the Touch a Truck events that happen in a lot of communities. And then our staff would lead 6 to 8 activities that would focus on the theme. So sort of agriculture or construction or basically anything that moves. Bringing in some community partners has allowed us to focus more on the guest experience as staff for the day and have experts provide the relevant information about their job or their hobby. For example, we've had race car drivers there, hot air balloon pilots, construction workers, ambulance and flight paramedics. We've been fortunate to have the helicopter land almost every year that we've had the events. That's been great. These are some more authentic experiences for families, and we can add to the fun with our giant blue blocks, bubbles, cardboard construction, and even more. So we rotate activities every year and just try to make it a really awesome event for all ages. As we became better known in the community, we were able to take more of the museum with us to different events that we attended. We took activities related to our exhibits, so construction, grocery store. Once our Take Flight exhibit opened, lots of aviation themed activities went with us to outreach. And people often recognize these elements from their visits to the museum. As our capacity has grown and as community events in our area have really evolved to more than just those vendor type tables, our purpose has changed. Now our goal is to provide immersive activities for a range of ages at community events, with hopefully some opportunities to speak with the grown-ups too, while their kids are engaged in play. We also hope that we model how adults can enhance child-led play in ways that are supportive and challenging. We bring play with an educational focus, and while this requires a bigger footprint at events than just a tabletop, and therefore more staff support, it is much more fulfilling. We recognize that some families can't, or for whatever reason, don't come to us in our space, so we've made the organizational choice to go to them whenever we can.
Thanks, Amy. And that really leads to the next thing that we want to talk about. And that's, we talk a lot in our organizations about outreach, and that means a lot of different things to different organizations and different people. So we want to talk about how we feel that we've been successful in really reaching the community in the purest sense. And Amy teed that up really well in terms of the success with an event like Move It, Dig It, Do It. But one thing that we're particularly proud of, there's the Community Foundation of Johnson County, Ellie, check it out. One thing that we're really proud of is how we've been able to engage a variety of partners. And again, we know we're preaching to the choir here because everybody on this call, I think, does a really good job of that. So we're honored that you think we might have some little nugget for you here today, but we'll just, again, our approach was to try to share some case studies of things that have worked well for us and why we think that has been the case. So some of you probably recognize what's happening here. These are called our Not a Box parties. And I should have brought a copy of the book, but it's based on a book called Not a Box, which if you haven't read, I've actually got several copies here. I could loan one to you, but it's a short little board book. And it's awesome. And it's all about imagination and utilizing simple materials to create and learn. And so we created this program many years ago with community partners, and one of those being the North Liberty Library you see there, our great friends. And so this was before, that's Emily. I was struggling to come up with Emily Tabor's name there for a moment, but it's back into the front of my brain. And so this is just was a fantastic program for us, and it's something that we continue to do in terms of working with cardboard. Not as much on these large scale events, because that was something that we did quite intensively for several years, but this was a hugely successful endeavor. And in fact, it ended up that we did this at all the elementary schools in Iowa City before the pandemic as well, which was a huge undertaking, but really awesome and a great way to reach kids in the school district. And again, this was just a simple concept where you take recycled materials and materials that can be recycled again out into the community, and usually parks. And that, of course, like I said, schools, but it could be done in a community center as well, that kind of thing. This just happened to be a series of park programs that we did. And again, this was all about partnerships. So as I flip to the next slide here, you'll see our friends from Iowa City Downtown Rotary as well. So great. They would come out and bring their grill and make grilled cheese sandwiches. So this was a wonderful example of partnership where we had some grant funding at different points from great folks like the Community Foundation of Johnson County, and then the wonderful partnerships that were made possible with the libraries and others. And it was just a wonderful way to reach kids and families where they were, as Amy said. And so that was something that wouldn't have been possible in the early years of the museum. So that's why we kind of talk about this as a continuum. At the beginning of the journey, it was about getting out there and letting people know that we were there. And then as we really kind of became more kind of mature as an organization, it was really about how do we, as Amy said, take the museum out to people and then continually refine our approach. And so this happened to be something that we don't necessarily do in the museum on a regular basis, but a great way to translate our principles of informal play and playing to learn in the community. But again, it wouldn't have been half the program it was without those community partners. So being really intentional about who should be at the table. Four Cs was another partner in this for many years as well. And, I think that the great thing that I think I've learned in the years, both with Habitat for Humanity and then here at the museum, is sometimes we fall into that feeling that like we're asking people for so much, like, hey, will you come do this thing with us? Or will you contribute to this? And I think we all know, and Jackie, our development director, will back me up on this. I know Tammy at Habitat will back me up on this, but the thing we have to remind ourselves is we're not asking for ourselves. It's like kind of the number one rule in development, I think, is we are asking on behalf of the people that we serve and the organizations that are doing mission-focused work that we believe in passionately. And so I think when we go out there and say, thank you, Tammy. When we go out there and say, we need your support, we need your help, it's an opportunity for them as well. And I think that's what we found with a lot of this partnership program, whether it be on Move It, Dig It, Do It, or something like this that's out in a park. It's giving those organizations and those partners an opportunity to shine their light as well in various ways. So when we go back to our friends at Rotary here, they're so willing to help us with these things because it's work that they believe in. And so I think giving people the opportunity to partner and being a convener, and it not always having to be just about us, but being a convener in a way, that's the most rewarding part of all of this, I think. So that's our kind of case study in box parties or not a box parties that was really successful for us leading into the pandemic. And then, of course, we were hitting our stride like everybody with work like this. I had been at the museum for just over a year before the pandemic started in earnest in March of 2020. And I'm really proud of the work that we did in light of that as well. And so Aimee's going to talk a little bit more about how we served in a time of critical need and what we learned along the way.
Sure. So obviously, COVID brought new challenges for us. We were closed for 4 months. All the community events that we had planned to attend were canceled throughout the year. We had understandably low attendance throughout the fall and winter of 2020 to 21. Our numbers basically fluctuated with all the different mutations of the virus and things like that were kind of changing people's behaviors. We chose not to offer summer camps for the summer of 2021, and instead we brought our staff and lots of activities to communities throughout the corridor. We called these park playdates summer shorts, as you can see there, and we visited 4 communities weekly for 6 weeks with a different theme each week. Wednesdays, we were in North Liberty. We were there for their summer lunch program, which isn't really intended to be open to the public, so we didn't advertise it in the same way as we did those other communities there. We knew that families needed play opportunities, but they might not be comfortable with indoor options. Our park playdates were well attended, lots of fun. They were hot, they were low cost, and they filled a community need for play and social interaction for kids in our community. We were exhausted by the end of that summer, as you can imagine, but we knew that we had made a difference. We had some families who attended every single week at the location that was closest to them. And we also knew that we needed to figure out a way to continue this type of programming even once our on-site programs returned and we had to shift our focus or split our focus a little bit. We have continued to offer park programming now for the past 3 summers. We've worked with a variety of community partners to do this, including like Iowa City Parks and Recreation, the Coralville Public Library, Cedar Rapids Parks and Recreation, North Liberty Summer Lunch, the Coralville Community Food Pantry, and the Neighborhood Centers of Johnson County. Each summer has looked a bit different as we've tried to meet the needs in our area and to find funding to support our staff engagement. You can see from the photos there, we've got pictures from our appearances at Green Square Park in Cedar Rapids outside the library there. We've got photos from one of our, I think, Iowa City Park play dates there with our blue blocks. And then the other picture there is we actually distributed some play packs to area daycare centers during the pandemic so that we were bringing some of our play opportunities to them when they were kind of limited. A lot of field trips and other group excursions weren't happening at the time. So we were able to receive funding to distribute play packs. We also sold those play packs during the pandemic in order to kind of support our education staff while that was going on. One thing that really struck us at all of the events that we've gone to over the past couple of years is that there are still families in our community that just don't visit the museum, even if they know about us. Even if we, make them aware of things like family free nights, we pass out coupons. So we have spent a lot of time in the last couple of years thinking about how to continue working with these families throughout the year. They've loved the engagement that we've had with them at all of these events off-site. But we'd like to continue working with them, seeing their families, seeing those kids, having those great interactions throughout the year, not just during the time of year that we can be outdoors and be at these summer type of events. So Jeff's going to talk a little bit more about how we have tried to make our space more accessible to families.
Thanks, Aimee. And so, yeah, this really has been kind of a bit of a full circle experience as you look back on like the past 5 or 10 years as we really developed this program, and then also realized that, hey, it's interesting that we often hear from people, and still after 25 years, people who get to know us at these offsite events that might not immediately know, especially if they're newer to town, they might not know that we have this incredible resource here, that like our main gig is here in our space 6 days a week. And then you have the opposite as well, when you have people who have grown to love the museum, and then when they learn that we're doing this stuff outside of our walls as well, this great programming and partnership programming, it's really interesting, and it's easy. It's just one of those. I have a colleague who calls it the curse of knowledge. Like, we know that we do all these things, but we have to share that, and not assume that people just absolutely know what the heck we're doing. And so I think that's one little bit of wisdom, I guess, that I would share with everybody is you've got to just continue to drive that point home. That those talking points, those mission points, you can't say them too often. And so I think for us, it's been making sure that people are fully aware of the full range of things that we do. And that just continues to open more and more doors for us. So I think that's the other takeaway for us as we kind of reflected on this presentation for today, is this is kind of a self-perpetuating machine. When you're doing a good job in your core work, but then also really kind of ramping up and doing these other things that move the needle, more and more happens, and more people take notice, and more people reach out. And yeah, you do have to say no sometimes. I think that's the one challenge for us, being kind of the only game in town when it comes to the kind of work that we do. And certainly there's a lot of corollary kind of partners that are kind of working in parallel areas, but nobody else quite like us. And so we do have to say no sometimes, but we try to say yes way more often, and that can be challenging. So, but it's critically important. And so, as Aimee said, one thing that we have recognized over the recent years is, well, going back to 2001, we've had a program called ICM for Everyone, which is really our primary driver for accessibility, and that was a lot of different things. But one major component or facet of that was a free membership program, which we were really proud to partner with a lot of organizations on that, and still do, who made it available to clients that they worked with, to say, hey, this membership program could make it possible for you as a family who might not have the $100 and some that would be required to have unlimited access to the museum throughout the year. And so that program has been great for a lot of years, but we started recognizing, I think, probably before COVID, but definitely with COVID and then beyond, that we felt that program could have more of an impact. So kind of in conjunction with, as Aimee talked about, really upping our game in all this outreach work, we also started looking internally to say, okay, if we have 350 families on our ICM for Everyone free membership roll, that's great. But we know there are more families out there who could benefit from this. And then we started looking at kind of user data as well, and realizing that some of these families that were on our ICM for Everyone roster weren't even coming, or maybe they were coming once or twice. And that didn't feel great once we kind of had that a little bit of a recognition there that we wanted to reach more families and make it a little bit easier, kind of lower that barrier to entry even further. And so we decided to adopt a national program that actually happens to be administered by the Association of Children's Museums, which is super cool. But it is a national program called Museums for All. Probably some of you have heard of it. It has gotten a lot of traction in recent years. And so museums that you visit all over the country, you'll probably start to see this logo, or if you haven't already. And this makes it possible for families who are enrolled in any number of different programs, a lot of which are related to food assistance and free and reduced school lunch, WIC, Hawkeye, use some of our local and kind of state programs here. And it's been a game changer for us. We have over 1,000 individuals on average who are taking advantage of this program and utilizing it each month. And so this fiscal year, we expect it will hit, I used that 15,000 number earlier. That's across some of our accessibility programs, but this fiscal year alone, we expect Museums for All to bring in 15,000 people from our community and beyond under this program. It's a no questions kind of asked situation. So one of the reasons we want to talk about this is because we want you to spread the word. We know that people are still learning about this. It's being well used, but there are certainly others who could still benefit from it. And so it is free admission, no questions asked, no membership card required, no proof of enrollment in these programs, and it is completely free. We have the liberty to charge anywhere from $0 to $3 per admission under this program's banner. Right now, we're at free. That might change in the coming years, but for now, it is. We introduced this a couple years ago almost, and it's been very well used. So again, the idea here is that we hope it's easier than ever for us to have a greater impact on our community. And again, so like we're just working to spread this love of play and the benefits that we can offer through our informal learning approach, both here and outside. And so it is kind of a full circle thing where now we're looking at this program as a way to reach even more. We have other accessibility programs as well, which if you have any questions about those, we'd be happy to talk about that further either today or at another time. But and you all are probably familiar with some of them. Our STEM Family Free Night that we do, and just other programs. Our Sensory Friendly Night that we do once a month on Sunday nights, the last Sunday of the month. And so we have been successful in kind of garnering community support for those as well. So I think that's another case to be made for extending programming outside your walls and looking for creative ways and Aimee kind of talked about this earlier, especially when you have a respected program, which all of you do, partners will take notice and they'll look at that innovation. They'll look at that opportunity to be involved in something that is reaching more and more people and doesn't feel quite as maybe niche as some of the other things that you do, and say, this is something that we want to get behind, that we want to support. And so that has certainly been the case for us, but it's an ongoing effort, as Jackie McCall will attest to look for those opportunities to support this work, because as I talked about earlier, the more you do, the more you're asked to do, and the more opportunities there are to say, okay, how can we really make a commitment to this on an ongoing, sustainable basis? And that can be a bit of a challenge, certainly, but very worthwhile. So a couple more photos here to share because I love photos. Speaking of STEM Family Free Night, here's some kiddos from a few years back. I love that kid in the middle who's like, just looks like he's goofing at the camera a little bit, but having a great time. And that's what we certainly try to foster here at the museum. Is just that that learning can be fun, and we know it's fun. And then of course we have a great time out in the community as well. I keep name checking Jackie here, but there's Jackie in the big purple hat and her white sunglasses waving at the camera. We do a lot of this kind of stuff too. This is at the Coralville Fourth Fest Parade. And we just love doing stuff like that as well, taking our big truck out. Now we have a van as well, a minivan that we take out to events. And again, we just try to do as much of that as we possibly can. And it definitely benefits us, and we hope benefits the community in some really special ways. I wanted to share one other story here before we open it up to questions, but talking about our impact. This actually is pre-COVID. The photo on your left there, and I've asked to use their names over the years. That's Fawn and Fawn's son, Tate. And this was at the end of a day where we had done a photo shoot in the morning, and everybody who came to the photo shoot received a pass to come back to the museum, but they were also able to play for the rest of the day. The photo shoot was in the morning. And so Fawn and Tate volunteered to come in and be a part of this photo shoot, and they were great. We had probably a dozen families here for the photo shoot, and this was actually a family free night as well. It was a Friday night, I remember vividly. And I came out into the museum lobby and I encountered them. That's the moment this photo was taken. And this is like 8 hours later after the photo shoot or something. And I'm like, Fawn, Tate, you're still here. And you can see Tate, the red cheeks. He was completely worn out, but he was just not going to quit because they'd had this just epic day at the museum. And I said, this is just a moment. I said, can I take your photo? And Fawn's like, absolutely. They'd already had their photo taken 100 times earlier, but and I just love that moment that we shared together and how much fun they had that day. But the part of the story that I really wanted to share with you is we've given them these passes, and I got a call a couple weeks later from Fawn, and she said, Jeff, I don't know if you remember me, but I'm Fawn, and we were there. I was like, of course I remember you. I have your photo. I've been talking about you for 2 weeks. And she said, well, I have some bad news. And I said, okay. I'm thinking something's wrong with her son or something. She's like, I had my purse stolen. I'm like, Fawn, that's terrible. And she's like, yeah, it's not great. She said, but I'm kind of working through it. She said, but honestly, the only thing that I really cared about when I realized it was that pass to come back to the museum was in my purse. And I was like, wow. And I'm kind of having this moment on the phone where I'm like trying not to kind of tear up a little bit. And I said, well, I think we can take care of that. I think we can fix that. She's like, really? Really? You'll give me another one? I said, absolutely. And she went on to say, we had a great time that day, but that's all Tate wants to do is come back to the museum. And she said, we're not really in a place financially that we can do that. But if you can get me another pass, we want to come back. I'm like, absolutely. And so I guess I would just stop there in saying that the work that all of us are doing impacts people. And I'm not talking about us, I'm talking about us as a community, impacts people in ways that we can't even begin to imagine. And I know you all have those stories where that kind of comes into full view, and it's like, wow. So those hard days are worth it, and figuring out how to do one more thing on the calendar, or grappling with that accessibility initiative and like, how do we fund that? Tammy, I keep talking about Habitat, but getting one more repair done, like those things end up having this cumulative effect on our community. And it's just obviously a wonderful reminder of that when somebody says how much they appreciate the work that you do. And so again, for us, that's just been about getting out there and doing more and more, and not being too insulated in what we do here at the museum, because let's face it, the core work that all of us do is exhausting, and running a operation like we have here is intense, and there are issues each and every day that we have to deal with, just like all of you. But it has absolutely enhanced our mission. I think enhanced our place in the community by making it a point of being out there as much as we possibly can. Again, whether it's like the Summer Shorts Initiative, where it's something that is kind of uniquely ours, or even more often where we are latching on to something in the community and hopefully saying yes in a way that's enhancing what they're doing for the broader community. And so without question, I guess that's the final thing I would say, without question, it has changed our organization. Going back to the beginning of that journey, as Aimee said at the beginning, it was just setting up a table and taking advantage of the opportunity to do that. That's what we needed to do at that point in time. But as we kind of trace that evolution, as we trace that journey a little bit, it's, I think, just inspired us to do even more. And so we thank you for the opportunity to share today. And we are happy to answer any questions that you have. By the way, that's our friend Pete the Turtle. Those of you who know the museum well know that we have a resident turtle named Peter, who lives in the museum lobby and has for 25 plus years. And so at some point in time, a few years back, Peter became our mascot, and we had this wonderful 2D Pete who emerged. And soon, Pete will be a stuffed animal. Pete is already a puppet. And so we're just very excited to share Pete with you as well. Thank you. Excuse me.
Thank you, Jeff and Amy. If anyone has questions, feel free to unmute or put them in the chat. We'll monitor that too. Well, I'll start up. When you decided to expand, especially during COVID, to so many programs outside of your space that were totally new, did you have to reconsider your hiring? How does your staff look? Is it people you already had? How did that work?
Good question. You want to tackle that first, Amy?
Yeah, for the most part, we basically just we reprioritized our tasks. So we obviously had things that all of us were in charge of that were, on hold or maybe weren't happening in the same way as they had been previously. And so for that very first summer, like summer of 2021, it was primarily our administrative staff attending these events, along with some of our managing playologists that we had kept engaged even during our closure. And then we were able to bring folks back online, as the museum opened, as it got busier, things like that. But really, we just kind of, everybody kind of took on some new tasks and priorities. And we're fortunate that a lot of people on our administrative team have previously been in either educator or playologist roles. And so they're comfortable in these type of situations, and also invigorated by those opportunities to go out and actually get into the community and play and be at one of those events. And so that's helpful too. I think it kept all of us kind of going at that time to be able to do some of these more hands-on things when it felt like so many things were out of our control in that moment. So
Yeah, thanks, Amy. And I guess I would add also, just for a little bit of context, we were closed for 4 months between mid-March and mid-July of 2020, but then really operating at very limited capacity, as most museums and arts and culture institutions were, and other organizations as well. And so, it took a lot for us to mobilize, even in that summer of 2021, to feel like we could do that. And there were still questions of, as everybody remembers, with as long as we were in that uncertain period and pre-vaccines, and just as things were starting to ramp up with vaccines, there was still even the question of, is this a good idea to be doing this? We had conversations like that as well, in terms of, we think this feels like an okay thing to do, but there was still some question about that. But as you can imagine, with that 4-month closure, it pretty much wiped out our hourly staff. We went from paying people for a couple weeks from the middle of March through the end of March, thinking, as we all did, okay, well, hopefully things will be cleared up by the end of March. So naive, so quaint. But, so we lost basically, we essentially laid off all of our hourly folks at that time, starting in April. And, certainly we always have some natural attrition anyway, with a lot of college students working on the floor of the museum. But a lot of our ability to do those offsite outreach events, leading up to the pandemic, was enhanced by the fact that we had these folks who had been with the museum for at least a year or two, had been trained as educators, knew the program when we went off site, were trusted to do that, to be able to represent the organization, so it didn't all fall to those of us on the leadership team. And so there was a huge amount of loss there, and needing to ramp up, as Amy talked about a little bit. So a huge interruption in that just operational kind of flow there. And then talking about doing things in a new way, and ramping up was definitely challenging, but it was obviously very worthwhile.
All right, any last questions? You guys just covered it all.
I guess we're just that good.
Well, I have just a couple of upcoming events from the Community Foundation I'm going to share here quick, and then I'll have you on your way. So there's a couple dates in the chat for you there, but essentially we've got a happy hour coming up on the 27th from 4 to 6 at Field Day. So hopefully we'll see some of you there. 21 and up folks get a complimentary pour of the Centennial Park Pilsner, so that's exciting. And then our next ed session is April 10th, again at noon on Zoom. That is with the Johnson County Clean Energy District. So we'll see some of you there. And on May 20th, we have our golf outing. So all the info for all those events, registration, RSVPs, everything's on our website. Check that out. But thank you, Jeff and Aimee. This was a lovely conversation, and we'll have it recorded so folks can find it online if they need a reference.
It's our pleasure. Thank you so much for having us, and thanks to those of you who were able to attend. And thank you, Tammy, for the love. Our family loves the museum, ages 1 to 11. Grateful. Thank you. You're too kind, my friend. Appreciate it.
We were there on Friday. It was kind of crazy, but we enjoyed it.
Oh my gosh, Tammy, last week was bonkers.
Yeah.
I should have known, but
Well,
we
thanks.
needed to get out, so it didn't matter.
yes,
That's good.
thank you for braving it.
Yes.
We appreciate you.
No problem. It was fun. Thank you guys.
Thanks all.